everybody. Jeff Jones here. Welcome to the weekly Chase Oaks Church podcast. Before we dive in, I want to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and download the Chase Oaks Church app. The app is the best place to catch up on messages, engage with our community, and stay in the loop with everything going on around here. Most importantly, my hope is that today's message inspires you to take your next step in your faith journey. Here we go.
Well, welcome to Chase Oaks. It's good to see you guys today. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to see you. It's always a good problem to have when you're speaking and they've got water from baptisms that are up on the stage. So cool to see those stories that are happening and to be a part of all that. And I'm so glad that you are here. And if you are new or new-ish to Chase Oaks, one of the things I hope you would discover about us as you get to know us is that we're just a bunch of normal people, hopefully semi-normal people, who know we're imperfect, who are all at different stages and different backgrounds and come from all different walks of life, but we're trying to get life right, and we're trying to do it as authentically as we can. And even when it comes to our faith, that all of us in this room or watching online are at different spaces in our faith journey, and that's okay, that we can all come to God as we are, and He'll start to work in us. One of the ways that I like to picture church is to picture a community swimming pool. Like we're about to all jump in, all of those pools are starting to open up all over the place here. And some of us, when we go into the pool, you always got some of the kids that are cannonballing in. They're at a space where they're excited and exhilarated in their faith journey. And that's some of the people that we even saw get dunked in a tank today. That's where some people are at. Other people, we're moving and grooving in our faith journey. It's like in a pool when someone's, they're doing laps and they're working on their backstroke or butterfly. It's like they've got a plan. It just seems like everything is flowing and life is good. Some of us are here and we've actually got significant doubts and questions. It's kind of like, have you ever been in a pool where you've been swimming and you come up out of the water and all of a sudden you look over to the side and you see a group of friends, like a group of kids that are hanging out, and all of a sudden you see one of the kids that starts to kind of drift away from the group of friends, and they're just sort of staring off into space with a weird look on their face, and you start to wonder, is that kid doing what I think he's doing in the pool? Because if he's doing what I think he's doing in the pool, what I want to be doing is to get out of this pool as fast as I can and to take a shower and to scrub down. Some of us maybe left the pool. Maybe we got hurt in the pool and you're back this weekend and you're trying to get back in the pool yet again. And you're understandably doing it cautiously. You're doing it carefully, kind of inch by inch, trying to reacclimate yourself back to the pool experience. And if that's you, one, just thank you for your courage in re-engaging with church, with re-engaging with us. And we're passionate about this being a safe space where you can go at whatever pace that you want to, that this is a pressure-free environment. But part of the reason why I talk about all of this is because of the series that we're in. We're talking about different characteristics that God will grow in us when we are connected with Him. We're calling it Fruitful, the fruit of the Spirit. And today's fruit of the Spirit that we're looking at is faithfulness, where someone or something is dependable, is trustworthy, is steadfast in a shaky world. And we indeed live in a shaky world right now where a lot of us have had our confidence shaken in so many different things. Like if you were to look at even different research and polls right now, confidence in different historically respected institutions, things like churches for sure, religious organizations, but also things like higher education or the federal government or education institutions or the medical institutions and doctors and scientists and certainly the news media are at an all-time low. Like it used to be that if Walter Cronkite said it on the news, we believed it. And that was a long, long time ago that it felt that way. But honestly, even with that, the reality is that our trust in some of those institutions has always ebbed and flowed. This isn't actually all that new of a concept. A couple of months ago, I was reading a book called 1929. And it was a book that talked about what led up to the Great Depression and also about the aftermath of what happened there. And one of the challenges that happened during the Great Depression was that people lost trust in banks for good reason. Like during this time, this wasn't an uncommon practice. It wasn't really all that bad necessarily or initially, may even still happen a little bit today, is that banks were taking depositors' money and they were using it to make loans and to make investments. But what would happen is once the economy crashed and once the investments kind of tanked and the stock market went down just a ton, that all of a sudden, all that money disappeared from the banks, where if somebody went to withdraw their money from their account, the bank would meet them with I don't know. Can you imagine? I mean, how scary that would be. And then that caused a lot of nervous energy for people, where all of a sudden, even some healthy banks that didn't have some problems, people would do what was called a bank run, where they would rush to the bank and everybody all at once was trying to withdraw their money from the banks. And so they all of a sudden came to a place where the banking industry failed. And at that time, there was no such thing as a federal or government guarantee on your money. If the bank failed, your whole savings was wiped out. Later on, what the government would do is they came up with an insurance policy, FDIC insurance that we have today, where, if you put your money in the bank, the federal government does guarantee it. And they did this as a way to try to get people to trust the banks again. But many people never did. Where did they put the money? Does anybody know? In mattresses. In fact, some of us found that money in our parents' or grandparents' mattresses. Like, what was this money doing here? And it was because they never trust that institution again. It is so easy to lose trust in institutions, and it's so easy to lose trust and faith in people. Because if there's one thing that unites all of us in the room today, it's this, that we have all been on the receiving end of a broken promise. That somebody promised that they would show up but didn't. Or that someone promised that they would stick around but left. Or a boss or an employer said that our job was secure and yet laid us off anyway. Broken promises are about as painful as they are predictable in a broken world. And so it'd be easy today, as we're talking about, faithfulness, is to kind of harp on this a bit and kind of drudge up all of the different ways that people have broken promises in our life and all sorts of things, kind of turn today into a bit of a blame game. However, there's another uncomfortable thing that unites all of us as well, and it's this, that we've all been on the promising end of a broken promise too. And that's an uncomfortable truth. And if we harp on that, which would be something that we could focus on, it could turn today into a bit of a guilt trip. It's something that I feel every time I go to the dentist. Are you right? It's like you sit in that chair, and the hygienist comes up to you. At least this is my experience. Maybe you're better at this than me. But I sit in that chair and the hygienist comes and says, Eric, you know how 6 months ago you were here and you promised you would regularly floss? Well, did you? And it's almost like that cleaning lamp that, that they use to clean. It becomes an interrogation lamp, and it's like focused on you, and the sweat starts, and it's like you just start crying. You're like, I know, I'm such a failure. I can't believe I didn't do it, And it's just all of this pressure on all of the ways that you've messed up. And honestly, church can sometimes feel like that too, right? That it can feel a bit like the dentist office, where it's like somebody like me is up front and they're just pulling up and reminding you about all of the things that you promised you would do and you didn't follow through on it. And the main point is to feel bad about that. The problem with that being is that all of us this is true for all of us, including even the Bible, that the Bible is full of people who have broken promises. You and I are in great company when it comes to unfaithfulness with some of the things that we promise to do. And so for today, as we talk about faithfulness, I don't want it to turn into a blame game. I don't want it to turn into a guilt trip. Really, there are times in our life where it might be good for us to look at our past, to say, okay, are there places where I have maybe been the victim of somebody that had promised something and they didn't follow through on it, and to unearth the impact that had in our life. Sometimes that's a really good thing to dive into, or sometimes it's good to look at, are there patterns in my life where I have historically struggled to keep my word and to really dive into, well, what are the reasons for that and what are the root causes of that? And oftentimes it takes a great counselor, somebody that can do that with us in a non-shaming way where it doesn't turn into a guilt trip or into a blame game. But for today, what I'd like to focus on is, instead of the past, is to look towards the present and ask a forward-facing question of all of us, and that's this: what does it mean for me? What does it mean for you to be faithful today? Like, picture right now it's Monday morning, and you're waking up, you've got the alarm going off, and you're about to get out of bed, and you look at the week ahead, and you ask yourself this question: how would you answer it? Or say it's Saturday and you're looking at the week behind you and you're asking yourself this question: was I faithful this week? How would you answer that question? And mind you, this is a different question than, did I keep all of my obligations this week? Or did I make everybody happy this week? Or did I go to everything that was on my calendar? This is a deeper, more clarifying question in our life. And my hunch is that for most of us in this room, at least for me, that we aren't nearly clear enough, not nearly specific enough on what our answer is to that question. And my theory is that the less specific we are on this answer to this question, the more scattered we'll feel. And I think most of us today, we run from thing to thing and obligation to obligation. We're more overwhelmed than we've ever been in the history of the world. And yet I think deep down, most of us have this sense that we're not actually maybe being all that we're meant to be, that we're not fully living into who we're meant to be. And I think this question is a key part of getting past that overwhelmedness to say, okay, how do I live into what I'm supposed to do? And so we're gonna get really specific on this. By the end of the night, I hope we will have a great answer on what that looks like for each of us. And to do that, as we get into this, I think what we'll see is a spirit-breathed opportunity. That's the heartbeat of what Fruitful series is all about. For each of us, as we lean into this question, for us to lean on God in a big way each and every day. And so to help us get more specific on that, we're gonna look at a story that Jesus told in Matthew 25. It was one of his famous parables. A parable is basically a short story that's made up about a spiritual truth. And in this story, he's gonna show us what it looks like to live out faithfulness. That as God is growing a characteristic of faithfulness in our life, that will shape how you and I show up in the world. And this parable is gonna help us do that. Here's how the story goes. This is Jesus talking. The kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. He then left on his trip. And so this parable has often been called the parable of the talents. Talent was the unit of money back then. It was also a unit of weight that existed back there. And so, one of the servants gets 5 talents, another servant gets 2 talents, and one servant gets 1 talent. And that servant that gets 1 talent just sounds like this sad, sorry amount, doesn't it? It's like, oh, I've just got 1 talent out of all this thing, as if it's like just some pennies that were in a sack that were thrown his way. But please understand, this is important. A talent back then was the largest unit of currency that they had. And that a talent at that point would have been equivalent to 20 years of wages for a common worker. So it wouldn't be extreme to say that 1 talent by itself is the equivalent of today's dollars of somewhere between $750,000 to $1 million. This was a lot of money that was being entrusted to these people. And this master who is entrusting this money to his servants, he does it in a thoughtful, careful manner. He's not haphazard about it. He proportions it out based off of the abilities of the servants that are working for him. Maybe it was based off of their abilities. Maybe some of them had just shown over time that they were better at managing money than other people. Maybe some of them it was capability, that they were in a season of life where it was a little harder for them to do some things, or maybe they had health stuff. We don't know the reasoning of exactly how he proportioned it by their ability, but just that he, this master who knew his servants better than anybody else, that he was careful, that he did it specifically for each of them, knowing that they were going to be able to do what they were supposed to do, and he gave them an assignment. And that assignment is super clear because two of them jump on that assignment right away. The servant who had received the 5 bags of silver began to invest, that's the assignment, invest the money and earn 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver, the $1 million, dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. So the first 2, they get to work, and they understood the assignment. It was to invest. It was to get a return on the master's money, and so they set about to do that. The last servant, what he does is he hides the money. He literally digs it, a hole in the ground, puts it in a mattress, so to speak, to see what it's going to do. Now, that sounds strange to you and I, but back then, that was not an uncommon way. If somebody had something really valuable, that was not an uncommon way for them to safeguard that valuable piece of property or that valuable amount of money. But that wasn't the assignment. The assignment wasn't to safeguard, it wasn't to hoard, it wasn't to hold on for themselves. The assignment was to invest, to do something with the money. The story continues. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they had used his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, "Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest. You gave me 5 million, and I have earned 5 million more." The master was full of praise. He said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount. So now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." The same is true for the second servant. The servant who had received 2 bags of silver, 2 talents, came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more." The master says the same thing. "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." And notice this, I just find this to be a little bit hilarious, that to this master, the 2 talents or the 5 talents, again, the $2 million and the $5 million, did you catch this, are small amounts. Like if that's small amounts to you, I would love to talk to you. We've got a couple of things going on here at the church. I've got a couple of college education funds that I would love to inspire you on. But to this master, those are small amounts because he's loaded. To him, it's like he's got all these resources in the world. But while in his mind, he had invested in them small amounts, it is, catch this, no small matter to him. In fact, he is very serious about the assignment that he gave these servants. And when these servants, the first 2, come back with a return, he meets them with incredible celebration. This is a master that not only is loaded, he loves to party. He's looking to celebrate when they come back. He's like, "Way to go, you did it." But the third servant, the one who dug it in the ground, who hid it probably because of laziness, of inaction, he not only didn't do the assignment, what he's about to do is attack the character of the assigner, of the master himself. Story continues. Then the servant with 1 bag of silver came and said, "Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate." It's pretty intense. "I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back." But the master replied, "You wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it." So catch the nerve of this servant. I mean, this is pretty intense. That this servant not only was sitting on what he was asked to do, he knew the assignment. The other two, it was really clear. He knew the assignment. He just decided not to do something about it. And to deflect from his inaction, he goes after the master and he accuses him of being harsh and greedy. Even though from the short story that we've seen, this master is anything but. That this master has been thoughtful, this master has been careful, this master has been kind, this master has been one that loves to celebrate, one that is generous, loves to party, all of those things that are opposite of what this guy accused him of doing. And then catch this, because this is how the master responds. He says, hey, even if I granted your premise, like even if that was true, that I was this harsh guy that, was greedy and after all of these things, that makes your actions even more inexcusable. Like, at least in the moment, if you thought I was this harsh guy, at least you would have taken the assignment so seriously that you would have at least gotten off of your bum and put the money in like a high yield savings account. You wouldn't have even had to do much of anything, and that would have at least produced a return, but you didn't even do that. And this is how the story concludes. Then he, the master, ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have it in abundance. But for those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless servant into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Happy church service. Good to be with you. No, it's intense, and it's meant to be intense, and we don't want to skip past the intensity of it, but it may not be intense in the way that we initially read this as the way it is. It may not be intense in the way that you might think. That what happens in this moment is the master separates this servant from his household. He throws him out of the house, what's happening inside the house at this point? A celebration, a party. He's on the outside of that. And in that time, most literally, being out of a house at that time period where there's no electricity, where it's scary, there's not a lot of security, that this guy is out in, the way the text says it, the outer darkness, where, as the text describes, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Which, gnashing of teeth, like the first image that pops to my head is like of these dogs that are like snarling as if this guy is being like bitten a lot, which is like, oh, that's pretty intense, or somehow that this guy is being tortured in some way, but I don't think that that's what's happening here. I don't think that's the best way to read gnashing of teeth. Like gnashing of teeth, a better way to picture that is to picture clenched teeth. Like imagine like you're watching a sports game, like it's playoffs in the NBA right now, and somebody makes a boneheaded play. Like they foul somebody when they shouldn't have fouled them, or they miss a layup, or they get a technical foul in that moment. And what happens in that moment? The camera zooms in on that, on that player, that athlete that did that boneheaded thing, and you see a look of expression on that player's face. And what is that look? It's clenched teeth. It's like this scowl and intense frustration. And that's what's happening here. That this is a guy who has intense frustration, deep sorrow and regret over a missed opportunity that he could have been a part of, but chose not to be. What Jesus is trying to do in this moment is he's trying to awaken us to what is at stake. A life that could be one full of regret, of missing out on all that God is up to now and forevermore, or a life that is a part of his purposes, his kingdom. Because that's what Jesus came to establish. He came to bring his kingdom, a kingdom that was based on his love and on his light and on his goodness. And he came to bring that so that everybody could experience it. And the great news about Jesus' kingdom, this is why people were so drawn to him throughout his ministry, is that his kingdom is open to everyone. In fact, the people that were most drawn to his message and understood it were those that felt the most excluded, the ones that had felt the most disqualified, that those are the ones that most understood that welcome was for them, and that they were invited into the presence of a king who had come to establish a new way to think, a new way to love, a new way to live in this broken world. And more than just be invited to come, what Jesus was doing was he was saying, you are invited to participate. to be a part of expanding my kingdom in this world right now, to be a part of a radical movement of my love and my grace in this world right now. And you can participate. What an incredible invitation. And like the master in that story, Jesus will one day come back to bring his kingdom in full. But in the meantime, you and I that are following him are to anticipate his arrival with how we live today, with how we go about each and every week of our lives. And that the way that you and I live today, we want to do so in a manner where by the end of it, when Jesus does come back or we meet him face to face when we pass away, that we would hear those words that those first two servants heard, which is, well done, my good and faithful servant. So what does that take? Well, let's go back to our original question that we asked, at the beginning of our talk, which is, okay, what does it mean for me to be faithful today? For those first two servants, they had a really clear answer to that question. In the story, they understood that they had been entrusted with something and with an assignment to do something with what they had been entrusted with. For them, it meant that they had been entrusted literally with their master's talents, with money. What's fascinating is this parable throughout history has inspired so much. In fact, it has inspired the word that we use in the English language for talent today. Because people came to understand that what Jesus was referring to here when he talked about talent was so much broader than simply money. It's why today when you go to a talent show, it's not like a bunch of kids that are going up there, showing off their allowance or anything, shuffling off their George Washingtons and Abraham Lincolns and everything for everybody. That instead what they're doing is they're showcasing their skills and their abilities. And you could trace it back to how people interpreted this particular short story, is that they understood that there was so much more that they had been entrusted with than simply money, even though that's a part of it. In fact, we have a list up here of just so many different things that could be considered a talent. Things like resources and relationships and positions and abilities, all sorts of things that fall into the category of a talent that we have been entrusted with. And that word entrusted with is important. It's a key word. Because it's one thing to have something, let's say like have a car. It's a whole other thing to be entrusted with a car. Like I remember when I first started driving and it came time to where I could drive on my own to my first high school dance. So this will date me a bit. So back in high school, and for the longest time, I had to have a chaperone, but I finally had my driver's license, and so I was able to, take some friends, and with that, I wanted to take a nicer car, and so my dad, he pulls out the keys. It's not these keys, this is my Kia, but he pulls out the keys to his baby, which was a 1996 Dodge Intrepid, which if you're aware of that, that's a pretty interesting car, but for him, it was his baby. This was like, it was like his sports car. He loved that car. And I remember when he handed me the keys and it came into my hand and it felt like 1,000 pounds. It's just weighing there. Because I didn't simply in that moment have a car in my possession. I had been entrusted with a car, which is a big difference. And I'm telling you, this is a game changer. When we start to see the things on this list, the different things that are things that maybe we have or we have, that are abilities or skills or whatever it is, when we start to see the things on that list as things that we have been entrusted with, it changes everything. That you and I, we don't just simply, it's one thing to maybe have a job or I have a position or, I have this role. It's another thing to mentally get to the place where you're like, okay, I have been entrusted with this position by an employer or by a company that is depending on me in a key way. Or for us to say, even in relationships that we're at, that each relationship on the other side of it, it's one thing to have a friend or even to have a spouse. It's another thing to say, okay, on the other end of this friendship, this person has entrusted me with something really valuable, with themselves. Like even for those of us that are married, when we were saying our vows to each other, when we were taking, when we were, going through the ceremony and that, it's as if in that moment we are handing that person the keys to the deepest part of who we are. That's a powerful difference when we get that mindset shift. And not only is it that with other people, I mean, you don't have to be a Christian to realize the power of being entrusted with something, but this goes to a whole different level when you and I start to say that it's God who has entrusted us with these things. I like how Colossians says it this way, where, let me get to the right spot here, where he says in Colossians 3:23, work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and catch this, the master you are serving is Christ. That each of these roles, we've been handpicked for them by God. Even on this list that I have up here, there's a few times where the things that you and I have been entrusted with, we didn't choose. Like that actually came into a week. In fact, I'm gonna make a prediction right now because of the fact that I'm talking to you about this right now. You're gonna have one of these moments that come into your week this week. I call them holy interruptions, things that we didn't choose. It's not like it was a relationship or a job responsibility, but it was something that was interruption in our normal schedule that we were actually in our minds, we've been entrusted with in that moment. Like for me, as a pastor, one of the things that we do here at the church is that we divide up calls that come into the office. If somebody wants to speak to a pastor. And please, if you ever need to speak to a pastor, please call into the church. We would love to have you, we would love to talk with you. That's part of my job. That's part of what I have been entrusted with. But I gotta tell you, as a planner, when I'm the one that's on call and I'm in the middle of whatever it is that I'm doing, it can be a little frustrating to get a random call in the middle of that in the moment. It's like I've got to do this heart check where I'm like, okay, this is not simply an interruption. This is actually something that I've been entrusted with by God in this moment. For someone who's sharing something deep part of themselves and that I've been handpicked for that moment. And the same is true for you, that knock on the door or that phone call that comes out of nowhere, or you're meeting maybe with somebody that's on your team at work and you can sense that emotion is starting to well up in between that there's actually something there that in that moment where it's not just simply something that's happening to us, it's actually, and this is mind-blowing, it's actually as if God in that moment is handing you the keys and saying, I've picked you for this moment, for this exact purpose. This changes everything, I'm telling you. I know it gets a little creepy, but I'm just like, think about this for a second, because some of us in this room, we're teachers, and we're about to enter into the last week of our school year. And it's one thing, again, to walk into the classroom, but what if you pictured it where you're like, okay, as I walk into that classroom and I see these kids, it's one more week, I don't know if I've got the energy for it. It's as if in that moment that Jesus is handing you the keys to that classroom and saying, I've entrusted you for this moment. Or parents, and I'm preaching to myself in this one, because we're about to enter into the summer vacation, the summer doldrums, where those kids that were with the teachers are now gonna be in our direction. And whether you're a parent or a grandparent or a caregiver and you're in the middle of the mundane and the monotony, I'm telling you, it helps so much to actually say, okay, for this season of this child's life, I've actually been entrusted with it from God himself. That realization is both clarifying and, can we be honest, terrifying. I mean, some of you are like, Eric, you were promising today wouldn't be a guilt trip. It's feeling like a guilt trip right now. You're saying that Jesus himself is my boss when I go into all these things. They're like, I'm already disappointing my coworkers, and I always feel like a bad parent. And now you're saying, okay, well, also with that, it just so happens that Jesus is the one that's watching over everything. That can feel a little crazy. And so stick with me, because there's a reason why today is in a series called Fruitful. Because not only does God entrust us with all of these different things, he empowers us in it too. I love how Paul words this when he talks about when he's talking to a group of churches. And again, the Apostle Paul in the New Testament, he's overseeing all these different churches. He's over so many different situations and things. The weight of it could be so intense. And these churches are facing so much strife, so much difficulty. And it's in that moment, this is what he wants to remind to them. He says in 2 Thessalonians 3:3, he's like, the Lord is faithful. He will strengthen you. Like if you're feeling overwhelmed at any point this week, memorize this verse. I would actually do a breathe in, breathe out technique where you breathe in, you say, the Lord is faithful. He will strengthen me. That it's his strength, not our own. And that when you and I, in whatever he's entrusted us with, when we mess up, and inevitably we will, it's actually just another opportunity to experience his strength and his faithfulness. This is what 2 Timothy 2:13 says, that if we are unfaithful, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny who he is. That God has never been on the promising end of a broken promise. He can't do it. And one of the things he promises is that he will never leave us or forsake us, that no matter what we've done, no matter what we do, that his love for those of us who are in Christ Jesus, we can never be separated from that. And that because of his faithfulness, that he is trustworthy, he is dependable, he is strong, that not only is that who he is, it's what he will form in us as we bring these opportunities to him. And that is so clarifying. Because I think part of the strength of this is that when you and I recognize the magnitude of the moments that are coming our way in the week ahead, it's actually an opportunity that will draw us closer to what God is up to in our lives. And what God will do through you is pretty cool. Because yes, your job may involve multiplying profits. It may involve multiplying sandwiches at home if you're a parent. And it's an endless supply of sandwiches if you're a parent. You understand how that is. Whatever the task is in between that, as we're doing those things, what God will do in us and what God will do through us is he will multiply life. That's the business he's in. That wherever he is and wherever he's placed us, that love and truth and grace would flourish in and through us. And so I want to bring that, with that in mind, back to our original question. And I want to amend it, if you'd let me, into two different questions instead. I want you to think about the week ahead, and I want you to ask these two questions. What have I been entrusted with? And how can I be faithful with that assignment? Like, what keys have I been given? And I'm serious, like if you pull out your phone right now and you start tapping it down, that won't offend me, that's great. Write down, get specific, what roles and different things. Maybe it's even, money that's come your way, or it's skills that you've had. But as you look at the week ahead, what are the different keys that have been given to you? And then get specific, what would it look like to multiply life there in the few days that come this week? For some of us, as we think about it, some of those assignments will feel small, maybe even a little mundane. And I think what this story tells us is that no task is insignificant. All of these talents are worth over $1 million. And that, yes, even if it does feel a little small at that moment, what God will do is he will use it as we're faithful there and dependable there, that it'll lead into more and more opportunities to be faithful in different ways. And some of us too, as we think about some of the maybe things we've been entrusted with, some of the assignments that are on our plate, are things that we didn't choose, don't want, but came our way nonetheless. In fact, one of the things I'm thinking about is a guy that his name is Ben Sass. He's a former United States Senator from the state of Nebraska. He is a former president of the University of Florida. He's an amazing Christian, amazing thought leader. He has a beautiful family. And so back in November, he was training for a triathlon. This guy was in shape, more in shape than me. And so he was training for a triathlon and had intense pain that started to develop in his back and in muscles throughout his body. And by the time he got to December, he found out that he had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And actually, as they said it, as they looked more into it, that he has 5 different cancers that are in his body right now. And so as he was given that diagnosis, the diagnosis came with a terminal diagnosis where he found out that he has only months to live. And so in the months since December till even up till today, as he's been, fighting this, fighting it with all his heart, he's going after a lot of medical advancements and treatments. He's been spending time with his beautiful family. He has a wife and 3 kids that are, in their ages of 20 or somewhere in there. Ben has actually been doing a lot of different interviews and podcasts. Like we just flashed up one of the pictures there where he was on 60 Minutes just a few weeks ago. He did an article or an interview with the New York Times. He started his own podcast, and it was the interview with the New York Times where the reporter asked him this question. I want to read it specifically. He says, Ben, this is his question, Ben, why are you talking to me? You're facing a terminal diagnosis. Lots of people would be traveling the world, buying exotic cars, going to exotic locations, checking off items on the bucket list, but you're spending time with a journalist, of all people. Why? And Ben's answer wrecked me, because what he responded with is he said, I didn't decide to die in public, but I ended up with a calling to. And that in each of these interviews that he's been doing, he's been using it as a platform to talk about the faithfulness of God. And the way he talks about it is incredible. He's he talks about how he's like, death is the final enemy. It's what it's called, which means it is an enemy. It's one that is after all of us, but it's a final enemy that has actually been defeated and will ultimately be defeated. And that all of us are on the clock. All of us, this is his words, will be pushing up daisies at some point in our existence. His benefit, as he said, is that he just happens to have more clarity on that in the moment. And that it's an opportunity for him to talk about the truth of the resurrection and the hope of the restoration that Jesus is bringing and has brought to him. And that he clings to that hope that that enemy has been defeated. And it's in that moment that he's been using his platform that God has entrusted him with to show about the faithfulness of God. That even while his body fails, his job isn't to be strong. His assignment is to point to the one who is. You and I have a different assignment. We have different things we've been entrusted with. But at the same time, all of us have different things, different talents. And as we go about this week, let's bring that before God that he would empower us to do those things well. Would you close your eyes and we're gonna pray. But before we pray, I'd love for you to think in your mind again of all of the different talents that you've been entrusted with. And just as you have your eyes closed, let them come to your mind right now. Maybe it's some people, maybe it's some roles, maybe it's some resources that you have. And as you think of those things and the assignment that God would have for you in there, let me pray this prayer over all of us. God of faithfulness, by the power of the Holy Spirit, fill us with your faithfulness so that it will overflow out of us each day and every way in the week ahead. It's in your Son's name that we pray these things. Amen.